Doping scandals in esports? So when we think about doping, we probably think about things like steroids or beta blockers, but that's not what people are taking to get better at playing video games. So just how well do these things work? What are people actually taking, and how does this change the future of the games? Today, I, Dr. Suave, am going to tell you all about doping in competitive video gaming. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this world, it is genuinely wild. So I used to competitively, now note competitively, not professionally, because I was decently terrible. I used to competitively play video games. Specifically, I played StarCraft 2, in case you're curious. And I did this while forming a nonprofit esports association in the middle of Nebraska while I was doing my PhD. So I probably was kind of terrible because I just didn't have enough time. But I entered this world and then quickly figured out just how genuinely wild it is. So when people are competitively playing video games and professionally playing video games, which is a new level, we're talking about prize pools of like millions of dollars, like to the level of Wimbledon in the US Open. So people train a lot to be able to do well at this. So in some of the studies that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, the average amount of time that they were training per day is 10 hours. 10 hours per day, sometimes 7 days a week. Like, it is genuinely hardcore. And that was just the average. The standard deviation was 2. So people were, training for like 14, 16 hours a day. And it's not even winning the competitions that matter sometimes. So sometimes it's just becoming known. So you can get sponsorships. You can stream on Twitch and make money that way. You can become a famous commentator like Day9, who I remember very well from my past. Like, there are all sorts of avenues for people to make money in esports. So since you can make a lot of money with it, it is incredibly competitive and people put all sorts of time and energy into it. And they also put all sorts of time and energy into ways that they can become just slightly better than somebody else. So enter the world of doping. Now, this is becoming a bigger problem because the Olympics just announced that like esports are going to become part of the Olympic sports. So since it's becoming part of the Olympics, people are now like, okay, well, this problem of doping is potentially going to become even worse. So there have been articles that have been put out to be like, hey, how can we see if somebody is doping? So if they're using certain types of drugs, can we even see them on that drug screen that day? And they're trying to come up with great ways to do this. So they're like, yeah, no, it doesn't really work when we do urine because we can't pick up anything that they just used, which is incredibly important right before they play a specific game. And then they're like, blood doesn't work because A, nobody wants to give their blood, and B, the way that you give blood is actually really not beneficial for then later playing a video game. So like, you kind of need your arms and hands while playing a video game, and giving blood makes that a little bit more difficult. This study was like, okay, basically we can use saliva, that's what they came up with, but in general, this is becoming a big deal because we need to know what people are taking. And weirdly, it's not actually that easy to figure out what doping is. So what counts as a performance enhancement drug for video game playing? Like, when I asked my husband this, he's like, oh yeah, nicotine and caffeine. And to be fair, a lot of people would be like, yeah, nicotine and caffeine are cognitive enhancing drugs, so they could make you actually play video games better. The skills you need to be able to play a video game well is typically like you need visual attention, so you need to track things. You need to be able to strategize, which requires a lot of like cognitive capacity. And you also need to have very quick reaction time. And so you need to have like a lot of what we called in the StarCraft terms, actions per minute. The best players were like moving around all sorts of things all the time. Basically, they constantly heard you must construct additional pylons over and over and over again. And they were constantly constructing additional pylons or building a new base or making some new army men. Yeah, the standard drug that people would take to help with things like reaction time or things like working memory is caffeine. And there's been a decent amount of studies to look to see if caffeine actually helps with video game playing. And what they found is that, I don't know, kind of maybe. Now, here's the thing. Most of these studies have just been done by like weird energy drink companies to, I think, say that there's a clinical test to show that their energy drink clinically helps people play video games better. Like, they want to have some sort of science term attached to their drink. And so they just kind of run a study to do this. And so a lot of these are like, this specific energy drink might help people play League better. With caffeine in general, they have done some tests, like more real-world tests with things like Fortnite and CSGO, that have found that it does help with things like hit accuracy and with reaction time. So maybe something is there with caffeine. And then other studies have found that, like, yeah, maybe caffeine helps with things like Tetris, but it's not helping with things like Rainbow Legend or like Super Smash Bros. Like, they literally found that it did not help with things like Call of Duty and FIFA. So sorry, caffeine might not be great for other games as well. So those energy drinks that people are taking, like, maybe it could be helpful, but maybe also just like sleeping would be beneficial too, because a lot of people just don't sleep when they're training. So caffeine might work, but it also probably is going to make you like jittery at higher doses and might increase anxiety, and those things are maybe not good for gameplay. So you have to be able to know the dose that you need for that. And pretty much everything else we have no data on. So a lot of people say that they're taking things like RIT and Addy to help them play video games. Now the problem is that they're taking these off label. So first, that's bad to do. So if you're using Addy and RIT and you're not prescribed it, like they react differently in your brain in a lot of cases. So they're probably going to be more likely to be addictive, and long-term use is potentially not great for you. But also, we have like no evidence that it works. So people say that they do things better on RIT, but there have been some studies, like I've mentioned in previous videos, where they've done test taking on RIT and found that it has no effect whatsoever. So you might be using something in a somewhat risky way that is not even doing anything beneficial for you in the first place. And then other substances like modafinil are banned. But again, we don't have evidence that those work either. So basically what it seems like is that like good old caffeine might help in some cases. Some of the other ones, we don't actually know if they work, and they could be kind of problematic. One of the articles I was reading was also saying that people, instead of just using drugs to help them play video games, they were doing things like having a TDCS helmet, so transcranial direct current stimulation, which is basically like you're stimulating certain areas of your brain. This is really helpful for things like depression, but like don't mess around with this, y'all. So yeah, people are basically willing to try pretty much anything to win these giant prize pools and to get this sponsorship. And a lot of these things are completely untested in this realm. So the science here needs to go further, and we need to start catching up with just how much this industry is actually growing. Because we've seen what happened in the sports realm, and we don't want it to happen again in the esports realm.